Hello, and welcome to this episode of Corporate Citizenship Watch, a conference board webcast series offering practical insights and tools for companies, investors, and nonprofits to meet the changing expectations for the role that business plays in society. I'm Jeff Hoffman, Corporate Citizenship and Philanthropy Institute leader, part of the ESG Center here at the Conference Board. The Conference Board is the world's leading independent nonprofit think tank devoted to serving business and society for over 100 years. The ESG Center focuses on corporate governance, sustainability, corporate citizenship, and philanthropy. The Conference Board is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. As such, we're committed to serving not only our members, but also society at large. So that's why today's webcast is being made available to the public and why we're making a wealth of resources on the COVID-19 crisis available to the public at our website, www.conference-board.org/COVID-19. All of us are grappling with the natural and human economic and social crisis of COVID-19. We have thought through much important things that are happening with our broader discussions around our disaster work. And on the 15th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, we want to talk about the lessons learned in the way corporations and corporate citizenship leaders have approached disasters, particularly natural disasters. I'm delighted to be joined today by two guests, Mike Gross, who is president of Toyota USA Foundation and general manager, social innovation for Toyota Motor North America, and Liz McCartney, who is co-founder and chief operating officer at SBP, formerly the St. Bernard Project, a nonprofit and disaster relief organization. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping messages to go over with you. First, you can download the background materials and the slide deck of today's presentation in the Downloads section at the bottom of your screen. Please note that you can only access these materials if you're watching this program on a computer. You won't be able to download materials from a smartphone or tablet. If you're on one of those devices and would like to receive any materials, please fill out your name in the chat box and we'll send them to you after the webcast. Second, please note that the following CEU credits listed here are available for this program. If you would like to receive credits, please note that you have to stay online for the entirety of the live webcast and place your name, email address, and credit type needed in the designated box below. For those who want CPE credit, you need to enter your full name, email address, and specify CPE in the request CPE credit space at the bottom of your screen. Please note that 3 pop-up messages will occur during the program to confirm your participation. This ensures that you aren't going to sneak out on us. Please click OK each time you see one. Third, I want to understand that we welcome audience participation in today's session. You can ask questions at any time by entering them in the chat box at the bottom left of your screen. We will work them into the conversation as time permits. Finally, a few other housekeeping notes. Please complete the evaluation form at the end of today's session so we can incorporate your feedback into future webcasts. You can share this program with your colleagues after the fact, as it will be viewable on demand in a day or two. And you can enlarge the screen to full size by clicking those 4 arrows in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. All right, now that that is over with, let's get started. This week marks the 15th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, which hit the Gulf in 2005, with more than 1,800 lives lost and damages estimated at well over $100 billion. This year, the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, called for an extremely active season, the most ever recorded since the satellite era began in 1966. Kind of scary when you hear that news. Is just this month alone, we have already seen disasters across the globe, from explosion in Beirut, Lebanon, flooding from monsoons in South Asia, a severe hailstorm in Verona, Italy, and here in the United States, wildfires in the west and 2 tropical storms right now in the Gulf, of which one has already wreaked havoc on Haiti and other Caribbean islands. So now is the time to prepare if you haven't already started. So Liz, let's start with you. SBP grew out of Hurricane Katrina, and its mission is to shrink the time between disasters and recovery. Can you tell us about how SBP got started in your personal connection to Hurricane Katrina?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay? Great.
Yeah.
So in February of 2006, I went down to New Orleans with my now husband and my mom to go volunteer. And it was 6 months after Katrina. And I don't know what I expected to see, Jeff, but I guess I expected a lot more progress. And the reality was that there was debris all over the streets. There were literally still houses on top of cars and cars on top of houses. And we met people who reminded us of our own family who 6 months after Katrina were waiting in line for food. And there was no plan to get them home. People didn't have FEMA trailers. The big institutional actors in the space couldn't articulate a clear plan to get people home. And more than anything, the families and the individuals that we met just wanted to get back home and resume a sense of normalcy. And so we had this conversation, and we sort of said, well, we can either say goodbye to these people and good luck and go back to our lives in Washington, D.C., or we can roll up our sleeves and pitch in and help out. And so that's what we did. Candidly, we didn't have much of a plan. We certainly didn't know anything about responding to disasters and had never lived in the South. But we saw a need and recognized an opportunity to help in some small way with a few, by rebuilding houses. And so we moved to New Orleans a few months later. We had a truckload full of tools that we didn't know how to use. We had raised a little bit of money at a fundraiser that my parents hosted, and we started rebuilding our first house. And it was very bare bones and literally just people helping people trying to resume some sense of normalcy. And over the next couple of years, our operation grew. We brought on AmeriCorps, we hired staff, we recruited volunteers, we raised money, and we built an operation in about 4 or 5 years that could repair roughly about 100 or so houses at a time.
That's really impressive. What has happened in years? I think you were talking about expecting more progress, but where have you innovated as an organization and move forward where you would like to see some other areas within the disaster field to also move forward with those lessons learned.
Yeah, sure. And so maybe I'll start with a very quick recap. So after opening our operating site in New Orleans and working there, and we continue to work there today, helping to revitalize neighborhoods. We opened an office in New Jersey and one in New York to respond to Sandy. We helped out in Joplin, Missouri after a big tornado. We have 8 offices around the country and 1 in the Bahamas. And all of our team on the ground is helping to repair homes and rebuild communities. And what we've seen over and over again in the communities where we work and other communities where we support other NGOs and government leaders is a really dysfunctional system of disaster recovery that can be greatly improved to serve the very people that it's intended to serve better, faster, and more efficiently and humanely, candidly. And so some of the things that we've seen and done over the years involve trying to address like the very gaps that we've seen. You know, on one hand, it's like it feels really good to go into communities and rebuild houses. And as an organization, we've rebuilt about 2,300 since we started our work. And on one hand, it's great. It means the world to those families. On the other, it's just a drop in the bucket when you look at the scale and scope of the impact of some of these disasters. And we felt like we couldn't just continue to react afterwards, that if we really cared about our clients and the impact that disasters have on community, we needed to get ahead of it. So we did a couple of things. One is we offer preparedness training, trying to help people understand and mitigate their risk by looking at things like how's their structure? Is it going to be able to withstand high winds? Doing an insurance assessment to make sure that they understand what their coverage is and what their coverage isn't. So that's one thing that we're doing. The second thing that we're doing is we've seen after disasters that the federal government is able to help. And there's significant money that is given to disaster-impacted communities. Right now, there's $60 billion worth of disaster grants that have been granted to state, county, and local governments that have been impacted by disasters. $60 billion, it's a lot of money. The problem is that the money does not flow quickly. And so the very people who need that federal money and need that federal assistance typically wait 3 to 5 years before any of that money flows into their communities and helps them repair their homes. So one of the things that we're doing is figuring out how can we educate leaders in the space, government leaders, who have been given these giant grants that they've never had to manage before, and figure out how to get the dollars into the community faster so that recovery happens more efficiently. So let me pause there, Jeff, and see if you have any follow-up questions or for that.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting, you know, that gap there, because that's a long time, you know, 3 to 5 years. So a disaster happens, and oftentimes we see that initial relief in flood of money, you know, the generosity of people who are, you know, texting in $10 to the Red Cross or another organization, that first 72 hours, which is so critical after a disaster. But, you know, unfortunately, I think we have seen with so many things in life, and disasters is one of those, sadly, there's a short attention span. And oftentimes it seems like the real work that needs to be done, you know, after taking care of those, you know, important basic needs of a roof over your head and food in the immediate time after disaster, is getting your life back in order, you know, business resumption or business continuity, etc. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, the opportunities between the relief period in where this larger amount of resources are coming in, and how SBP is not only playing a role, but I also think what you had talked about, educating, you know, public officials, about the situation is critical, because as much as I think you're an amazing organization, when you said what you've done is a drop in the bucket, it's a big country, it's a big world, and it does seem like policy change is really going to be critical to take that gap and shorten the period in the middle there.
Yeah, that's great. So a couple of things come to mind. One is, I think, immediately after a disaster, one of the things that we found can be really helpful is providing clear, precise instruction to people about how to optimize their insurance award or how to maximize their claim with FEMA. Or simple things like, how do you treat your house for mold yourself and do it in a really cost-effective way and not spend a lot of money hiring a mold contractor who likely will get pretty similar results if you do it yourself. So what we're trying to do is get people on the right trajectory right after the disaster happens and position them to make really good decisions. The last thing we want is for people to become our clients. The last thing we want is for people to need help and not be able to do it on their own. And so we found that by sharing those resources in local communities, whether it's with local media outlets, schools, businesses, others, like take it and just push it out so that people have clear instructions and understand sort of what their path should look like, is a great, very simple, low-cost sort of first step. The second is that, all of the funding that comes in from corporations and philanthropic organizations is so critically helpful and important in that gap between the date of the disaster and when the federal money starts flowing in. What it does is allow organizations like ours to go out into the community and find people who are the most vulnerable and provide stability for them and get them back into their houses so that their network doesn't have to worry about them, right? Their family, their friends, their neighbors, and they can focus on their recovery as well. I think it also provides, maybe this sounds crazy, but it provides hope to people. I think after a disaster, there's this real sense of loss and hopelessness and sort of what's going to happen next. And when people in communities see that others around the country and in their own community care, it brings a sense of hope and purpose, and it means a ton to people. And folks have shared that with us over the years. I think the other thing that can happen is when we talk about policy, there's an opportunity to structure programs that can take philanthropic or charitable donations and not just use them, but reuse them. And so here's a great example. The federal money that comes in can be either awarded to someone as a grant, or it can be used to reimburse someone who's already done repairs on their house who didn't have insurance. And so for people who maybe can pull together a little bit of money from a bank or a family member and do the repairs, they're going to get reimbursed. But there's plenty of other people who need that same support. They just can't come up with the capital or the cash to get the repairs done to qualify for reimbursement. So we see a great opportunity to take all of these charitable funds, use them, get reimbursed, and continue to reuse them. And so that we're really stretching and leveraging those charitable dollars as much as possible to help as many people as possible in that short time span. One other thing that I think is really potentially exciting and a game changer is FEMA has just recently opened an arm of their agency that is thinking about using new technology. This is technology that the insurance industry uses pretty regularly, where they use flyover and drone data to do damage assessments. They don't send people out to communities with a piece of paper or even a tablet. They're using big data to understand what their customer and client needs in order to be whole again. And we're really excited to see that FEMA is starting to explore this space. What it means is that people are going to, if they qualify for a FEMA award, potentially get it a lot faster with a lot less bias introduced into the assessment process. And there is plenty of that, unfortunately, as people from outside of the community go into a new community, do damage assessments, and oftentimes those awards are a lot lower than they should be. And so using big data to help FEMA understand the extent of damage on clients' homes can really help to both speed up the process and I think improve the accuracy of those awards.
I think that's really, 15 years ago when Katrina hit, a lot of us were looking at how we could help. I don't think big data was a concept that we had even thought of. So, again, how times have changed. I want to talk a little bit about how what you referred to is how corporations do help within that gap time there. And in thinking back 15 years, the conference boards, what was then called the Contributions Council, which is now called the Corporate Social Responsibility Council, of which I was a member of, we went to New Orleans about 2 months after Katrina hit. We changed our meeting schedule and we went down there to really see what was going on. And besides meeting with, the mayor of New Orleans, the governor of Louisiana, the number 2 person at FEMA, the head of the Red Cross, all the usual suspects, we got on a bus and we toured, for instance, the 9th Ward, and we met with people who lived there. We met with the head of the neighborhood association to really better understand oftentimes what we were hearing, and on the news in this, to what was happening on the ground. And I think what to me was really important about that visit is beginning to change the thinking of corporate disaster response and the importance of the long term. And there are companies that started with you from the very beginning who continue to work with you now, and also companies that have stayed continuing to work rebuilding in the Gulf after Katrina, because again, it was a long-term process to get the Gulf area back on their feet. One of the companies that was with us from the start has been a long time and important partner to you at SVP, is Toyota Motor Car. And as we said, we're very fortunate to have Mike here, who leads their corporate citizenship efforts for Toyota. And Mike, wondering if you can talk a little bit about why this disaster response is important to Toyota, and also what your strategy and plan is, why you have decided to stay with this and really take the long-term approach.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you, Jeff, for asking me to join. I know we struggled earlier with my audio issues, so hopefully everyone can hear. Resilience is important to our business. We have dealers all over the country. We have plants in places where tornadoes are prone to hit. So it's very important to the continuity of our business that we engage with an organization like SVP and think about how to prepare and then react to a disaster. And this includes not just being able to get our plant back open, but can our team members actually come to work following a disaster? After the big earthquake and tsunami hit northern Japan several years ago with so much devastation, our global CEO, Akio Toyoda, said the best way for us to support society is to get our business running again so that people have jobs to go to and commerce can continue and money flows. That's one of the ways to help people have some stability and recover. So we've taken the same approach here in North America, and we've found SVP to be a kind of a root cause problem solver who wants to address these issues long before a disaster hits. And then after the disaster hits, rebuilding is one thing, but getting the money to flow faster is another thing. I think it's an abomination that there's $60 billion right now sitting there for disaster victims at many disaster sites, and it takes 3 to 5 years for them to actually see that money. So we think it's important that SBP works on the front end, and it's important to our business. You know, we're a just-in-time lean company, so we don't have a lot of inventory of parts sitting around, and anything that shuts down our ability to build cars has a huge cash flow impact on our company, not to mention the impact on our team members. I do want to, Jeff, if it's okay, I'd like to talk about our engagement with SBP a little bit, because it's pretty robust. When we first met Zach and Liz, they were doing what nonprofits do, which is ask for money, and that's okay. But the first thing we did was actually share the Toyota production system with them. And it helped them cut the amount of time it was taking for them to rebuild a home by about 50%. And we helped them visualize what the issues were and what the gaps were in the rebuilding process and how to close those gaps by solving the problems as they appeared. And I think you'll recognize what I just said compared to what Liz has said about problem solving and gaps, and that I think Liz will admit that the rebuilding part of it also helped them see the light on what the other gaps are in the whole continuum of disaster response and recovery. And so they've taken that problem-solving mindset and translated it to that entire continuum. You know, we have given money over the years. We've helped them fund the AmeriCorps folks who help them rebuild homes. They have a fleet of Toyotas. I'm on the board. I've helped introduce them to many other corporations. I helped introduce them to the National Association of Manufacturers, where they're now a key disaster partner for NAM. We gave $1 million when Harvey hit Southeast Texas a couple of years ago and helped establish them there, because I knew what they were going to do. They were going to share their knowledge and their best practices with all the other nonprofits on the ground who are trying to help rebuild all of these communities. And they've done that very, very well. We've added SBP's preparedness training for citizens to Toyota's learning management system. It's not a requirement that our team members take it, but thousands of them have taken this training, and they've learned how to, it seems like no-brainer stuff, but they've learned how to identify the right documents they need to have after a disaster and how to keep them in a safe, dry place. And sometimes little things like that can cut months or years off of the disaster recovery process. So as you can see, we've been involved in many ways. Our government affairs group is helping in Washington to introduce SBP to all the right people to make sure that you know, the process, as Liz described earlier, helps to get money flowing faster to the people who need it the most.
And I really want to highlight what Mike said there, or unpack it, because, you know, oftentimes we think, especially in times of disaster, it's, all right, you know, companies are giving their money to organizations who are on the ground in helping, which is important. But I think that deep relationship that SBP and Toyota have together is a good example of, even beyond disasters, the important relationship that a nonprofit and a company can have around addressing what are critical issues. One is, Mike said that he is on the board of directors of SBP. So I think that is really an important piece of information. Two, he talked about how they're using their expertise as a company and how that has helped SBP lower the amount of time it takes to build a house. And cutting it in half, well, that's incredible. And it allows you to be much more effective helping those people in need. So I think when we talk about wanting to help people in need, and we talk about social impact measurement a lot, well, here's a way that a company is helping an organization actually be able to exponentially expand their capacity. So I think that is really a critical piece of information. Policy, the fact that the Toyota government relations folks are introducing SBP to policymakers is really important, because as we talk about narrowing that gap and how do we get that funding that is there out the door, we really need to have those stronger connections around policy. And I think that leads to then what Mike was talking about with the bottom line implications too. I mean, you know, this is a win-win. It's a win for those who are affected by disasters and the work you're trying to do, Liz, but I think it's also important for Toyota because they need their plants back up. And, you know, I know, Mike, some of your plants, you know, were closed for an extended period of time because of the pandemic this spring. You know, it's a different kind of a natural disaster, but still that, you know, has a big impact. And getting those plants back open, you know, the employees working, you know, the automobiles and trucks that you manufacture out there. I mean, you know, that's important for the economy. There's all the issues there. And then last but not least are your employees. And I think what you were talking about is when there is a disaster and making sure that your employees have what they need first and foremost for themselves and their families is really important. And then being able to take the materials that SBP has, you know, and then have it as part of your employee training offerings to help them be better in time of disaster, I think is really good. And I will give a plug for Liz. They have this disaster preparedness at the home document, which is amazing. And it says right there, shrinking time between disaster and recovery. I hadn't necessarily thought about this from a at home. You know, I live in the Los Angeles area, you know, we're knock on wood, but, you know, we're always kind of ready for an earthquake with our earthquake kits out there. But there are a lot of important things beyond what you should have in your disaster kit, you know, and ready to go, and things to think about in a broader way that, you know, sadly I had not looked at. So I highly recommend that. So Mike, you know, that was just to say that what you just said, I think really is a model partnership and collaboration between a company and a nonprofit, even besides the disaster area. Before I go back to Liz, are there any reactions to what you just said or what I just said?
Well, one quick thing on having your documents and everything together as a citizen, and I think Liz can probably respond to this better than me, but if you're a victim of disaster, there's basically a couple of routes you can take to apply for disaster assistance. And you need some basic documents to be able to do that. And if you've lost them in the flood or the fire or the wind or whatever, it's going to set you back a long period of time. So, and because the application process to ask for the money is convoluted, it's tedious, it's repetitious from one agency to another, Um, this is what leads to despair. If you don't have your documents and then the process for asking for the money takes forever, then the process of receiving the money takes forever, people get desperate. We know it leads to higher suicide rates and many other things that just keep holding people down. And I can't state strongly enough how important we believe that is to get these people home faster. I personally think we can do better in the United States than what we've done. But Liz can speak more clearly to what takes so much time and why.
And even before Liz reacts to that, let me give a plug for SBP. The CSR Council had a joint meeting with the U.S. Chamber of Foundations Corporate Citizenship Center in February in Puerto Rico. And the reason why we met in Puerto Rico, it was 2 years after the hurricanes hit. And, we have continued to hear stories, to your point, on things that weren't happening. And we wanted to go down, see for ourselves, learn from what happened, what hasn't occurred in those 2 years, and potentially how companies can be part of the solution, but also to see all of the amazing things that have happened in those 2 years. And I think SBP has been part of that. So Liz, now I'll throw it over to you based on what Mike just said, and seeing how we do live in a country where you would expect to see more results, but at the same time, when you peel back the onion, organizations like yours are in there and doing the hard work. I think, Liz, you're on mute.
One of the things I think about every time I talk to and see Mike is our very first interaction with Toyota when they came to teach us TPS. And they brought some pretty high-level people to our little office just outside of New Orleans. And one of the very first questions they asked us, and I promise I'm going to answer your question here, Jeff, was, do you guys talk about problems? And my husband, Zach, who I started the organization with, he's nodding his head, and the rest of us are standing behind him going, no. And so, it was this really this moment where they said, okay, well, if you really care about your clients and you want to get better, the first thing that we have to teach you is this concept of continuous improvement. We call it constructive discontent at SBP, this idea that if you're in the people-serving world, or really in any company or organization, we have to commit to constantly doing the work that we do better. And it's not going to change radically overnight. It's a series of small incremental steps that are going to result in lasting change. And the parallel that I find really interesting in the disaster recovery space and sector is that there's a real resistance to change anything. And this notion of, well, we've been doing it the same way for, however many years, and it's working fine. And the reality is that it's not working fine. What we see is people who are impacted by disaster, especially people of color and communities of color, lose significant equity in their home. Oftentimes, speculators come and scoop up their property. What we see is there's incredible disruption to businesses. So Mike talked about what Toyota, they care about a lot of things, but they also care about being able to get their people back to work as quickly as possible. And it's impossible to have a competent, safe workforce if they're really worried about how they're going to repair their house. It's hard to be fully present when you're building cars and you're doing work that can be potentially really dangerous if you don't know how you're going to house your kids and your family. And so I think what I've found so incredibly helpful is this very honest relationship that we've developed with Toyota over the years, where we can talk about what's working in our organization and what's not working at our organization. They can talk to us about what does success look like, what do they need as a partner, and we can try and figure out how to meet in the middle and create a really powerful win-win. And then also, how do we look outside of just the two of us and see what's going on and use our kind of collective skills and network like Mike talked about to try and move the needle within the whole space so that more people are served more efficiently. And so, I can't emphasize enough how, especially in disaster recovery, transactional relationships don't work. We need organizations on the ground who are going to be ready to respond and train and share, need to have operations that are up and running and functional and practice, they have plenty of time to plan. So for example, my team, we've been talking regularly every day about Marco and Laura, trying to figure out where is it going to go, how do we make sure our teams that are in those regions are safe, and then how are we going to be ready to respond when there's a need to do that. And all those functions of an organization work extremely well when you have partners like Toyota who say, yeah, we get it, we're going to invest in AmeriCorps. Or, yeah, we get it, we're going to teach you our TPS model so that you can shrink the time by nearly 50% when you're rebuilding houses. So, it's we've been very fortunate to get to know Mike and his team really, really well and build this relationship that has benefited, lots of our current clients, and I think more importantly, and thankfully, people who never became our clients because of the various ways that we've been able to think about the root cause and try to come up with solutions that address that.
Yeah, and, Liz, you touched on something that I would love to hear you comment more on. And, oftentimes over, the past 6 months, we've talked about how the pandemic has magnified the inequities in society. And then over the last 2 months, so many of our companies and really the whole country and actually the whole world has been looking at racial justice and how do we break down, systemic racism, structural racism. And I know that's something that we often see a lot with disasters, and I think sadly we also saw in Puerto Rico that Puerto Rico was hit by the third of a series of hurricanes, and not to disparage all of my friends in the Houston area, but Houston got hit first, and most of the money went to Houston, but yet they were probably the best equipped as far as the recovery aspects. Whereas by the time we got to Puerto Rico, there was frankly donor fatigue, and but yet Puerto Rico probably, what we know, needed a lot more assistance. So I think disasters as well as other things really show and magnify what those inequalities, inequities are. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'm definitely not an expert, but I'll share what we've learned especially working with a lot of lower-income homeowners and in lower-income communities, and certainly lots of communities of color. I think the real estate market has pushed a lot of people to the fringes, and this isn't a recent problem or challenge. Because of the history of redlining in our country, people, lower-income people, tend to live in less desirable and more at-risk areas, and so they tend to be more susceptible to disasters in the first place. The second thing that we've seen, and there have been some really interesting articles about this, one in the Washington Post recently, about how African Americans, the majority of their wealth is tied up in equity in their home. And so when a disaster hits and damages or significantly damages the house, people lose the majority of their asset or equity because their home's damaged. And so one of the things that we started to do is look at how does our investment into individual homeowners' houses, right? So if we go and say we're going to fix Miss Smith's house, it's going to cost $30,000 that Toyota gave us to fix this house. The story doesn't end when the house is fixed, because in a lot of ways, like what we've done with generous support from Toyota is preserve equity for that family. And with that equity in their home, people are able to, you guys all know this, like send their kids to college, have something for their grandkids to pass it along to, They're able to contribute to the tax base in the community in which they live. There's all sorts of positive effects. We've seen that for every dollar that we invest, we preserve $3 of equity in people's homes. And so it has this very positive impact in the moment, but also it has long, long legs that can continue to give and contribute. And so, I think really thinking about how our work impacts communities, especially low-income communities of color, and the long-term positive effects of that has been helpful. On the flip side, I think there's lots more to do still. I think about Puerto Rico. One of the big challenges that they had was FEMA came in to give people awards who didn't have insurance or who were underinsured, but the overwhelming majority of people, like well over 50%, couldn't qualify because they didn't have things like an actual address, right? They don't really exist and their property doesn't exist in a way. They don't have the right paperwork. They don't have the right address. They don't have all these things that seem to all of us in the mainland like small little details and things. But without that, you can't qualify. And if you don't get that initial bit of money, the trajectory for recovery goes way off the rails and takes a lot longer.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and we saw that firsthand when we were there in February. But you mentioned the $1 invested, reaps $3 in benefit as far as home equity, in those communities, and I think that's really important when companies are looking at their social justice plans and philanthropies in a way that they can actually include disasters as part of the work they're doing around racial justice. So I think that is a really good point for our group. I had mentioned disaster fatigue, and I want to do a quick audience poll to get your thought there. It's been an interesting year for so many reasons, and I'm sure we all entered 2020 with our set disaster budgets that we have, not realizing that we were going to have a pandemic, and companies were extremely generous with the pandemic. Then with the death of George Floyd, and we saw lots of companies making large financial donations to racial justice organizations, and now here we are in August, and we are seeing all of these disasters that are happening, and sadly will continue to happen to various degrees. So I'm not sure where it is on your screen. On mine, it's on the right-hand corner. There's an audience poll. Want to know how your disaster, oh good, there we go, thank you, is your disaster response to COVID-19, and I would also say, adding in the racial justice issues, has it changed how you're going to respond to natural disasters in the rest of 2020? Also knowing that companies have been hit hard by the resulting economic crisis of the pandemic as well. So your responses, are you going to give even more, or your disaster response going to decrease, or your response stay about the same, or will it go on a case-by-case basis? So we'll give you a few seconds to do that. While we're doing that, Mike, you had mentioned AmeriCorps a couple of times. Liz, you mentioned AmeriCorps. I think, from a national service perspective, we have seen AmeriCorps members, those members of their NCCC program, and others really step up to the plate in times of need. We've seen a lot of it with the pandemic and how they've been able to be repurposed. But Liz, can you talk about how you utilize AmeriCorps members and how they're part of your whole formula of how you operate?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. We're so grateful for our partnership. I still remember the very first time we worked with an AmeriCorps team was on our first client's house outside of New Orleans, when we got a team of NCCC members. There were about 10 of them, and we worked together hanging drywall, taping and floating a house. And since those early days, they've been a great partner. Now in our organization, we have members serving at our different operating sites around the country where we're doing long-term recovery. And it's a great service opportunity. They either serve as volunteer coordinators, they work directly with clients, helping them through the application process, or they help with the construction team, either supervising teams of volunteers to do the construction work, or helping with supply and logistics, or some of the other kind of permitting and other things that need to happen in order for us to build a client's house. So they're getting a great direct experience serving communities, but they're also, sometimes we have members who are either straight out of college or maybe haven't even been to college yet, who are supervising like executives from Toyota or high-level people from farmers. And so they're learning all these really important skills outside that they can apply outside of their service with our organization. And interestingly, Jeff, about 50% of our staff are former AmeriCorps members that served with us. So it's been a great pipeline of talent for us, too.
Oh, that's a great story. And Mike, can you talk a little bit about your employee volunteers and how they tie into your disaster work?
Yeah, I sure can. It's kind of interesting, Jeff, where most disasters happen so far, knock on wood, there's not a lot of, our operations haven't been so close, so it's a little bit more difficult for us to easily engage our team members. I'll take Harvey as an example. We have a regional distributor based in Houston that distributes Toyota vehicles to dealers in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. It's called Gulf States Toyota. And because they're based in Houston, they got very engaged with SVP when SVP showed up there. So it's an example of how, Toyota gets engaged in other ways. And I know Gulf States provided not only manpower to rebuild homes, but has introduced SVP to a lot of other, potential partners in the Houston area. It's for any of the folks on the call today who have manufacturing operations, not always so easy to ask people to step away from the assembly line to go volunteer. So we have to do things differently.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you for that, Mike.
I want to mention something about AmeriCorps. Liz and I have been talking about this for a while. I actually think the AmeriCorps members are a great untapped reservoir for Toyota talent. And it's one of the things I want to tackle one day is how do we introduce these folks to potential careers at Toyota and actually hire them, because we love the spirit they have, and at the same time we're helping to build this little Toyota production system army of people through AmeriCorps who are being deployed all over the country, and we love that.
And Mike, I've got a program for you called Employers of National Service, so we'll talk offline
Okay.
about that too. I know we're running out of time, but I want to quickly just mention the results of the poll. So about 26%, say disaster response will increase, which I think is really, interesting, based on obviously what we're seeing. 26% say it will stay the same, and about 48% will take it on a case-by-case basis. I think what's interesting about this is we have a report that will be coming out every day looking at corporate citizenship in a post-COVID world, which is really looking at the new normals, as we refer to. These numbers are a little different from that. That survey was done a couple of months ago, So it was really more, the first two were pretty much, nothing was going to change, but it was really at the end that was interesting with the response. I think it was pretty similar to this on the case-by-case basis, but it was pretty even with the response will remain the same. So always interesting to look at how responses in different periods of time evolve. So in our last couple of minutes, Mike, Liz, a parting comment for the group?
Well, just from me, first of all, I'm thrilled to be part of this. Yeah. I just want to encourage companies to think more broadly about how they respond to disasters, and I think getting involved on the front end in terms of how to prepare and how to be resilient really leads to better results on the back end. Liz and Zach and I talk all the time about how the resilience work they do could actually put them out of business one day on rebuilding homes. I think that's what we'd all like to see, right? Is homes need to be rebuilt. So that's always the mindset for Toyota and SVP. And certainly I think, too, corporations have so much more to offer than just money. Money's important. But we all have a lot of other assets and resources and knowledge and know-how to share with nonprofits like SVP, but a lot of other nonprofits as well. And often sharing knowledge can be more valuable than the dollars. And I think SVP has realized that for sure.
All right. Liz?
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks again for having me. And Mike, I'm just so grateful for our partnership. We always talk about how, we don't just want corporations' dollars, we want their cents. And I think our partnership with Toyota is a great example of that. They've taught us so much so that we can go turn around and help communities and help clients a lot more effectively. We are constantly trying to learn and grow and get better. So if anybody on the call has thoughts or ideas or just wants to chat for a little bit, I'd love to do that. We're really committed to shrinking the time between disaster and recovery, and we're really committed to getting better and trying to change the sector and the space. And we know we can't do it alone. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation offline, we'd very much love that and would appreciate the opportunity. So just thanks again, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you both. I think the work you're doing separately is good, but the work that you're doing together is critical. I think it shows the importance of partnerships and collaborations. And hopefully it's a good model for others who were on the call today. I mean, I certainly learned a lot, so really appreciate it. Just want to point out to all of you watching today that our Corporate Citizenship and Philanthropy Forum will be coming up December 3rd and 4th. It's a virtual event. We're titling it At the Heart of a Company's Social Impact. So heart being both the center and heart showing that compassion that I think that we all have for the communities that we serve. There's a code there. You can get a $100 discount off of this event. And for those of you who are members of the conference board, this is complimentary. So important for you to know that you have this benefit. Last but not least, to stay abreast of what is happening within our corporate citizenship work at the conference board, that report that I had mentioned that's going to be coming out any day, we have our report that we do annually called Disaster Philanthropy Practices, which will be out in September to see when all of those hit, so to speak, and an opportunity to click a link to discover the insights in those reports, sign up for our newsletter at that button there. Also a reminder that that tool that we had talked about, disaster preparedness at home, which I think is a great document, can be downloaded here. So again, Liz, Mike, thanks so much. Really good conversation today. Really important because disasters, sadly, are not going to go away. They are part of our reality. So we appreciate all of you who tuned in today to this Corporate Citizenship Watch. So thank you and stay safe.
Jeff.
Thank you.